I want to welcome all of our viewers that I hope view this tape tomorrow, next week, next year, 25 years, and the next 100 years. I had just asked what the date is, and I forgot all what it was, but I'm going to tell you this is December the 5th? 4th. 1991. See how many mistakes I make? And what we have on for this afternoon, we're taping this in the council chambers in the city of Oldsmar. We are going to tape for our ancestors and for our kids and our kids' kids the living history of the city of Oldsmar. And I want to thank everyone here that is going to participate this afternoon in this. Because whatever you contribute to this tape will be remembered and listened to for a long time. And I want to thank you for that. Before I say anything about Oldsmar, in my opening remarks, I want to introduce everyone that is around this table. I'm going to start over at this far corner, and when I introduce you, I want you to tell us what your first association is or was with the city of Oldsmar, be it a relationship or be it a date, okay? And the first fellow I want to introduce is at the far corner over there, is Al Boyd. And you can just speak into the camera up there, and you go ahead and tell those people when you came here and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I am Al Boyd, as he said. I am not a resident of Oldsmar. I have never been, but I'm vastly interested in the town of Oldsmar. And at the present time, my grandson is writing a book on northeast Pinellas County, and that will be published very soon. We have now 51,000 words ready for the publisher, and every statement in the book will be verifiable in written information for posterity. I thank you for the opportunity of coming here. I am a neighbor, not a resident of Oldsmar, although at one time I owned a great deal of property in Oldsmar, practically everything north of the Tampa Road. That was my interest in it, and I don't know of any better place to live than the town of Oldsmar, but I cannot say that I'm a resident. Thank you.
That's okay. And our next guest, and you don't have to stand up if
I don't have to stand.
No, you don't have to stand up if
Okay,
you don't want to. Just go ahead and just.
I'm Judy.
Judy Brown. Judy Bryan.
Bryan. And I came to Oldsmar when I was 14 from Rockford, Illinois. And I hate to say it, but when I came here, I thought, where in the world have we gotten to? It looked like such a small little place, and I didn't like to drink the water there, and I was very unhappy for a day or two. Then I started meeting people and went down to the bay, and everyone was friendly, and it was the nicest crowd, and we all stuck together. Of course, we kind of had to right then, but we really liked it. And I guess that's about all I can say about me right now. And I finally moved to Tampa. I married my husband here. He came out from Tampa to work in the bank while Mr. Trask was on his vacation. And I went and exchanged a $10 bill to see what he looked like. And that started it. And then we moved to Tampa after our boys were born.
Okay, thanks a lot. And our next guest is
married Ruth Bowles, and I met and lived and roomed with Elvira Bowles at Tallahassee, and came home and met Paul Bowles, and in a year's time we were married and we lived in Tampa.
okay. And our next guest?
Beatrice Canaday. We came to Oldsmar when I was about 5 years old, and my first recollection of coming into Oldsmar we didn't have any place to stay, and we stayed at the hotel, and I thought that was just great. I can remember the big winding stairway, and I thought that was so pretty. And I did enjoy seeing that, and well, I enjoyed many years here in Oldsmar.
And our next guest?
I'm Bernice Coleman. I came here 75 years ago this month, and if you think things are wild here now, you should have seen it then. The Rios had purchased all this property and offered his workers in the plant an opportunity to come here, and he shipped their furnishings, everything, and they came and built, I guess you'd call them shacks. There weren't sanitary toilets, and we came here a week before Christmas, and there was no dairy. Of course, there was no place to buy bread, no grocery store, nothing, except the good weather. And of course, we as children loved it because we loved the warm weather and we loved the bay. And I think my mother had her problems, though, with the sulfur water, which gagged her when she tried to drink it. I think she finally put tea in it.
Okay, and our next guest?
I'm Bob Keller. I came here in 1918 with my parents, who came down with REOs to start the tractor plant and founder here in Oldsmar. I remember, like Steve said, everyone was so friendly, and coming from Michigan, we weren't used to everyone that you met being a friend. They kind of looked at you and up there, and you were an outsider, but down here everyone was part of the gang, and there was lots of good times. The bay was where we spent most of our time. There was good fishing, good oysters, good crabs, lots of fun.
Good swimming.
We spent most of our time on our bathing suits. The old pier that ran out in the bay, I remember when my father went home one time, his brother met him at the railroad station and said, "Herm," said, "remember those sharks we used to get down there about that long?" He said, "Don't forget, they were 6 feet long." He wanted his stories guide when not find out he'd been telling stories, but Oldsmar, I have a lot of fond memories. I left here when I was in the 4th grade, but went to Dunedin, but still Oldsmar has a lot of fond memories. Like you mentioned, the old hotel. We lived in the hotel till the furniture came down, and it's hard to believe the old hotel burned down. All that's gone. The grocery store that's there, the old barber shop used to be down the road. When you drive by, you can still picture them in the back of your mind.
Thank you. And our next guest?
I see that Bob has fond memories of the barber shop.
He got it all.
He got it all. Well, my father moved to Florida in 1919 over into Sonoma and had a business manufacturing conveyors. And he moved to Oldsmar in 1930 into these tractor buildings that Bob referred to that were empty at that time. And Mr. Olds wanted a payroll and get something going in here and keep people working. So my dad moved his business over here, and we had a manufacturing business, built conveyors and citrus machinery. Al's father used to run some of his oranges over our citrus plant that we had as a test plant there in one of the buildings that Olds had. So I have fond memories of Oldsmar, and I just love all these people that are here. It's just great to see them all here again. I wasn't the original, but I knew the people and went to school with them. All these people here, and so I know a lot about Oldsmar, and I'm trying to collect history on Oldsmar. And if anybody listening to this tape has some artifacts of things that were made in Oldsmar, like an old tractor, I'd love to have an old tractor or an old Grove heater that we can put in a little museum that the city has now provided a space for. So I'm just delighted to have this group here to help preserve history.
I'm learning some things about Bud that I didn't know before, and I'm going to use them on him. Bud, the last tape we had, I introduced him as Bud Lister, and I got criticized for it. He didn't even introduce himself this time. So this is Bud Lister.
That threw me off. I only knew Bud Lister.
Thank you, I appreciate that. See there? We'll come around the table now, and our next guest.
I'm Richard Maltinos. I was born in Tampa in '29, and we moved out to the farm just outside of Oldsmar in '46, where we've been here ever since, with the exception of 2 years that I was in the Navy. I'm also a retired postmaster here in Oldsmar for 30 years. And this afternoon, I'm sitting here with these lovely people, waiting to hear some things before my time on Oldsmar that maybe I've never heard before. And I hope we have a very good meeting.
We will have a good meeting. Now, the better part of this half is the next man to introduce himself.
I'm Tom Maltinos, Richard's father, and I moved out here in Oldsmar in 1945, in the outskirts of Oldsmar. I've never been a resident of Oldsmar. And right now I'm living 50 feet away from Oldsmar. And the property where I'm living on was supposed to be the Oldsmar Yacht Club. And the property I own near Double Branch goes by the name of Bowles Subdivision. And I bought that all through the state, and I had a little farm there. So I got acquainted with a lot of people here in Oldsmar, and they were very good to me. And mayors, councilmen, it goes way back. It makes me feel a little squirmish right now, a little shaky, because to know that there's still a lot of people that I haven't met for a long time, they're still alive, and that makes me very glad. And I am very proud to see Oldsmar, because I know when I lived in Tampa, people would, when they hear Oldsmar, they laughed. I know Pinellas County laughed at Oldsmar, but now they're paying attention to Oldsmar, because Oldsmar is going and going and going, getting better and better, and I am glad that I lived so close to Oldsmar all these years and these good friends that I've had.
Thank you. Our next guest, everybody here is a special guest. They really are. But I have to say this, that our next guest has lived in this town longer than any other person in the city of Oldsmar. And for that, Lon, we thank you.
I'm Marilyn Gambel. I don't know that name hardly. They called me Gamble since I was a kid.
It used to be Kid Gam.
Yeah. Yeah, you thought so.
Yeah.
We came here, my mother and father and dad, my mother and father and I came here in 1918, and my dad knew Olds up in Detroit, but he came down here from my mother's health, and Olds put him in charge of the sawmill and planing mill. It was over the other side of the railroad track. And after that, I've forgotten what year, but my dad and Bob's dad had a cabinet shop. And it was in the old garage here. And then they had over in sawing and the planing mill too, I think, wasn't it, for a while? I know they had it in a couple of places.
They had things all around. They moved around to
It's hard to believe, as big as the old sawmill was, you can't find any trace of it anymore.
No, they just,
Wood boning locomotives and all the rails, the oxen, the mules they use for getting the logs in.
yeah.
The size of the logs, too, you
Yeah.
don't see anymore.
North of the railroad tracks?
Yeah.
I remember that now. It came to me.
Across the
sawmill.
highway,
It's an awful
across the
big
highway,
building.
yeah.
It would, I remember that now.
Sawmill was the other side
I
of the
couldn't-
track, and the planing mill was this side.
Mhm.
There's a pile of sawdust there,
Yeah.
over 1,000 feet high for many years.
And I remember you when you were riding on the scooter coming down by my farm.
That's right.
When you were a young man. Go ahead, dude.
Well, that's about all. I've enjoyed Oldsmar for a good many years. And we've always been a lot of nice people here. Everything, I couldn't say anything bad about Oldsmar if I wanted to. I don't want to.
We'll get a lot more out of him in a little while, because he has a lot of history up here. And our next
I
guest.
have to be reminded of it
That's
sometimes.
okay. We can handle that too.
I'll try.
That's what we have, that lady on your left.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Marilyn Gambel, Schonborn, and I've lived here my 49 years. I remember the old school, and I was very, very upset when they took my little schoolhouse away.
So was I.
Me
Because
too.
I went to school there from first to the fourth grade, and we had one row of each of us. And I wish that today they would name the brand-new pretty school back there Annie Tyree, but I don't know what you'd have to go through to get that, but she was a jewel. I raised my 3 children here, and I love it, and I did swim in the bay, and my kids swam in the bay, and we're still living. You know, everyone's like, ugh, swim in that, but when that's all you have, and you just make do. But I remember a lot of things, too, as we go along.
And last is sometime the best.
Okay. Ethel Swanson, Van Bibber now. My father and mother moved here, and I say close to the time that Lowndes' father moved here, because the way I understand it was around 1918. And my father started the grocery store in the hotel building. Down below the hotel was all these buildings. There was a drugstore and a hardware store and his grocery store, dry goods store, I think. So my mother and father had 4 children. My oldest sister was Temp, and she married Mr. Petrie. And my brother Virgil is still living, and he lives in Tampa. And Glodille, my youngest sister, was born here, 1920. She's here today. And we went through the tidal wave in 1921. And we were living down next to the big building they called the Suey Building at the time.
Where was that? Where was that?
It was down on the main street at the end there, about a block from the hotel.
Oh,
Uh-huh. And there was a little house on the other side of it where we lived at that time. We later years moved to Congress Street. But first, when we moved here, we lived in the back of the store building. And my dad started the grocery store. But we were crossing over to go into this big Suey building there because the water was coming in our back door from the bay, from this tidal wave in 1921. Every once in a while, somebody writes an article, and that's been in the paper 2 or 3 different times lately. And somebody was helping Mother. Glodille was about a year old, and she dropped Glodille. The man caught her by her feet. And Mother had packed all her jewels in this little suitcase, and that floated all the way across the highway before the man could rescue it. Never thought any of the watches or anything in there would be any good. But later, after she passed away, I had her watch fixed. and I still have it. Yeah. But I never dreamed it could be fixed after going through that salt water. So we had many, many good times with all the young people growing up here in Oldsmar. I have lots of good memories of everybody. And it was just a gang of kids that grew up and stuck together. They always went to the bay to swim. We'd have big fish fries, like I said a while ago, down at the pier. And we just had lots of good times, dances every week and different things. There was always something to do. We all went to church. After church, we'd all walk to the pier. When that train run at 10:20, that was a signal for everybody to go home.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Ethel's got a good memory.
my parents' home is still here on Congress Street,
Still
but
there.
it's been sold, yeah. Somebody else lives here.
And I want to thank every one of you. And before we get into that, I'm Jerry Beverland, or Gerald Jerry Beverland, whichever you prefer. I have not had the exciting as you have. I have not lived here the years that you have lived here or seen what you've seen. I have had the privilege of living here. Another couple years, I'll be pushing 30 years here in Oldsmar. I have been in Pinellas County since 1946. I came when I was 12 years old from Idaho. And I never knew Oldsmar was here. I never even dreamed there was a place up here as Oldsmar. I was managing a Winn-Dixie, and I was looking for a house. We were the first house on Starkey Road, just down by J.B. Starkey's after he left. And this fella, another store manager, came up and said, "I found the ideal place for you," because he knew that I don't like a lot of people around me. So he brought me up to this place called Oldsmar. And I said, "Oldsmar, where, you know, what county?" So we came up, and there was a house on the bay, the northernmost point of the bay. And I seen this, and I said, "This is where my kids are going to be reared." We had 4 young kids. I said, "This is where they're going to be reared. They can run till they drop." What a fabulous town. Remember when you'd come across the old bridge and hit that brick road? I just said, "I'm coming into heaven with that brick road." So we bought the house. And I'm not leaving. To me, this is the most fabulous city in the state. There's been some comments. The little article read here that was written. I have gotten some of my questions out of there. Oldsmar has been overlooked in the past. Oldsmar will never be overlooked again. Never. I said this in the last tape, and I'll say it again. Oldsmar is where every other city wished they were. Even though we're that old, 1918, for what we have here, we have the beginning of a fabulous city because we have all the area to grow in. So I have your same sentiments. It's a fabulous town. I think it's great. A little history. Now I'm going to give you all a chance to correct me, okay? So after I finish, you go ahead and correct me for some of the things I say. This is primarily for the tape and for discussions. I think it was April 12th, 1916, when everything was finalized, or around that date, and R.E. Olds purchased approximately 38,000 acres. It was 37,500 and some acres, which comes out to almost 54 square miles of land. That land was from Pasco County south to Tampa Bay, from Lake Tarpon, east to the Hillsborough County line, Also, east of the Hillsborough County line, way into Hillsborough. Also, half of Safety Harbor, and a great big part of Clearwater. He bought it all at the same time, so the people in Safety Harbor, they don't know it, but they almost became part of Oldsmar. He paid, I think, something like $400,000 for the whole thing. Now, I may be off a little bit here, but it was about $400,000. I have seen the original title search. I was trying to swipe the title search, but I got caught. Bud won't let me keep it. But I'm going to try. When, as the little paper said, the slogan that REOs had was Oldsmar for health, wealth, and happiness. That was the slogan he came up with when he was trying to sell it. He built a post office, the railroad station, the Wayside Inn, and a power plant, which I never knew until here on our first tape, that Oldsmar had a power plant. I didn't know that. I also found out that they serviced, I think, part of Safety Harbor and part of Clearwater.
Safety Harbor and electricity.
Palm Harbor.
Palm Harbor?
Dunedin.
Dunedin?
Yeah. So when they had electrical store and the power went off all over.
I want everybody that watches this tape in the future to know that Oldsmar had the first power plant in the north part of the county. Okay? I think it was around 1925 or 26 when Tico came in.
25.
25 when Tico came in, okay. Olds built the Rio Farm, and they were basically, I think, in Hillsborough County. And that's where Tommy comes in and where you were reared. I found out that there was a park across from the hotel, which I didn't know. I take it there was a gazebo across from the hotel or something that they had.
Yes.
Every Sunday afternoon, that they had music.
They had alligators in the pond.
They had alligators in the
And other animals too, I'm sure.
What pond?
They had a pond all out here. This was a
Right back
park
out here,
and a
used to
pond.
be a fenced in pond. They had a deer and a fence out there.
Yeah.
Because when the lightning killed one of the deer, everyone at Oldsmar had venison.
Okay. All right. The pond was on the south side of the railroad tracks?
Right.
That's where the bank building is now.
The entire park was on the south side of the railroad
Right.
tracks.
Okay. The pond was where the bank built. Okay, that's what we want. And I think the largest industry, correct me if I'm wrong, in Oldsmar at the time was the Oldsmar Tractor Company?
Cleat-track tractor. He named it the Cleat-track. It was a small track type tractor because of the muddy condition of Oldsmar. The wheels wouldn't take hold. So he devised this track type small farm tractor. And he had a big demonstration here in the early 1920s. And it was a complete failure because he got in a little ditch, and when he started to back out, he found out his head engineer forgot to put a reverse gear in the darn thing. He was terribly embarrassed. I remember it like it was yesterday.
So he
I
had
was sitting on the horse watching it and almost applauding. Mr. Olds and I didn't get along.
So then what he did, he went out and got a mule and pulled the tractor out?
That is in history as Cleat-track Tractor Works.
Okay, Clay Track Tractor Works.
CLE, Cleat-track.
Cleat-track Tractor. Try to say
Yes.
that. Okay.
It's a tongue twister.
Why it went to pieces.
In 19... See, now I didn't know this.
Letterhead that showed a picture of that tractor.
Yes,
I
yes.
gave it to him, and that's why he doesn't get anything else. I didn't get it back.
Just paying him back. Here we go.
You want to talk about something else, Jerry?
You want to talk about something else?
Yeah. I've got pictures of him, and I haven't gone back to him.
Okay. In 1926, which I didn't know, is that the name of Oldsmar was changed to Tampa Shores. Okay? And I still have the original gavel of the 1926 gavel that was used from that time until Ward Schreckengast was no longer on the city council. And he was a little upset whenever he left council. I was on council at that time, back in the early 70s. So he says, you want this gavel? I said, yes, I want this gavel. So he gave it to me. So right now the gavel is going into the in our new city hall. It's going to be displayed in there. Everyone in town needs to enjoy it like I've enjoyed it all these years. And in 1937, the name was changed back to Oldsmar from Tampa Shores. The racetrack, I think, was built in about 1926. And there was 2 or 3 reasons why Oldsmar never grew. After REO's began his development here, and in our first tape we talked about how they ferried people in from St. Petersburg to sell them land and wined and dined them. One thing was because of course, the land bust. Probably the biggest thing was the 1921 hurricane that scared everybody, because Oldsmar was pretty well devastated because of that hurricane. Now, hurricanes never bothered me. Since 1946, I could care less about a hurricane.
We haven't had one since that period.
Well, Elena taught me to respect hurricanes.
We haven't had the wind in the right direction.
I would like to ask you to get back to the first opening in Oldsmar for Mr. Olds to take advantage of. You missed just one little period of history there. The Tampa Road was paved with red vitrified Georgia brick in 1911 to keep Pinellas County from withdrawing from Hillsborough. That gave Mr. Olds a roadway out to his subdivision. Otherwise, he could not have developed it like he did. He would operate buses and bring people out here. Excuse me for interrupting, but I think we should continue this in a contiguous manner from the beginning of Oldsmar as much as we can.
That's fine. No, that's what I want.
Isn't what you call the Forest Lake Road from Forest Lake in Tampa Road, or 580, 84, that goes south to go near My Way In? Isn't that still that red brick underneath that road?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, the red brick.
That red brick.
Yeah.
They were laid in place. There was no grading because we had no machinery. I remember that quite vividly, and every time in 1918 my daddy took me in the buggy to go over and buy some residue horses from World War I that were being auctioned in Tampa. So we led 2 horses back, tied to the back of the buggy, but every time a motorized vehicle would have to get off of the 9-foot paving, usually they were stuck but good because of the mud or sand, with no ditching, no grading or anything of that type. And I remember going over that quite vividly from downtown Tampa, and it went right by the old flowing wells that you're well acquainted with, and that water was very similar to that of Safety Harbor. It would cure any ailment.
Yes.
And I have proof of my grandfather going there in Safety Harbor, and doctors all over the state had tried to cure his stomach ailments. He got to Safety Harbor and started drinking that water. In 6 months, he was a well man. Never had any more trouble.
When I first
Now
came,
that water's gone for good.
when I first came to Florida, speaking about sulfur water, I was used to mountain water. And I thought sulfur water would cure anything. Your life.
If you could drink it.
Oh, I couldn't drink it. I drank
Especially if it's got a little salt in it, like my wells did. I had a lot of flowing wells.
One more thing. This highway from the county line out here, there's a monument there erected to the deceased in World War I. It is now on Kennedy Boulevard in Tampa, last I know.
Did Kennedy?
We
were looking for it when we came out.
We wondered where it was. We kept waiting to come to it.
Well, that had been preserved the last I knew. It was on Kennedy Boulevard opposite Moss
There is
Brothers
one.
store
Oh, yeah.
in Tampa.
Yeah.
And that road was Memorial Highway.
Memorial
with oak trees and palm trees alternate, and it caused many accidents later on when the speed began to increase a little bit.
Oleanders.
Now, I'm bringing back memories there as we progress with Oldsmar. Turn it back to you.
You said about the accidents, when they changed the bricks to a 14-pound asphalt brick.
That's when it
And
happened.
then when it started to rain, the oil come up out of the asphalt brick. And the old Livingston
You
service
couldn't keep
station
a car on
over
it, could you?
here had a wrecker, and as soon as it was starting to rain, they'd go out and jump this battery and get it started because it knew it wouldn't be long before they'd have a call. People would try to hit the oleanders because that'd slow them down. If hit the bricks, hit one of the oak trees, it'd damage them.
I suggest that we try to follow this time-wise, all we can, so to build up. And in the recording of history here, that will give us a background to elaborate upon.
That's fine. Without the red bricks, the red brick road was built from Hillsborough through Oldsmar.
It went on to Yellow Bluff, which is now Ozona.
Ozona, oh,
It was
right.
paved all the way.
Right.
9
And
foot wide.
I mean, 9
It
foot
was the
wide.
first paved road in this area to prevent Pinellas County from withdrawing from Hillsborough County.
But
It did not
It
work.
didn't work right.
it didn't stop. It stopped at the county line, the red brick road, and from the county line to Tampa was a shell road.
Shell Road, okay. Okay, I remember the old Tampa Road into Palm Harbor. In fact, we just now removed one of the old bridges, one of the, down in front of Harbor Palms. It had been there since the beginning. They just now took that up because they moved the road over to the north a little bit. Then you said that, okay, after the red brick road, what was the next phase of that
They
road?
put asphalt.
They widened
They
it,
widened the road and put in asphalt.
made it dual lane. Lane for each direction of
And they
traffic.
planted
Then-
an oleander and an oak, an oleander and an oak.
That was in Hillsborough County.
Yeah.
And Dr. St. George Fechtig did the same thing within his area from Yellow Bluff up to Oldsmar. Where Olds was developing Oldsmar, Dr. St. George Fechtig got in with him and obligated himself for the sawmill here. And I have papers on that because I had to go to First Exchange National Bank, I believe, in Tampa, to settle all those obligations that Dr. St. George Fechtig had, because I bought thousands of acres of land that was offered after Fechtig's death. He had no heirs. He died a pauper because of bad conditions here in the boom. That he was a fine gentleman. Mr. Olds and I did not get along because I was a cattleman and people would invariably leave the gates open out here. The cattle would get in town. How well all you people that live here know.
Old Mr. Albritton used to
And
try to
wild
keep
hogs were worse. Well, I had nothing to do with the hogs, but they wanted to blame it on me.
There were two
So
brave
Mr. Olds and I did not get along at all. I was an outlaw. And I was made a deputy sheriff in 18, I believe it was. No, it was a little later than that. I was 15 years old when I was made a deputy sheriff in Pinellas County. Up until this year, I've served 62 years as a deputy sheriff of Pinellas, and I've seen it grow.
Yes, you have.
Did you ever see the trail that they had that went through here before the road was put in? Where our farm was, I think you remember where the farm was.
Yes, sir.
The trail run from one end of our farm all the way through down to Double Branches. And
It was
it's a dirt trail.
There's a trail there and a stopover, a two-story house at Rocky Creek. And Double Branches had a swale where you could walk your horses across it if the tide was not too high.
Yeah, I saw that trail.
Yes, sir.
And we used to walk on it, and I wondered what it was.
Now, let me interrupt you again, please. I don't want to monopolize this. But the old military trail from Fort Harrison in Clearwater came approximately the same road after about the Ulysses plant down here. It followed the highlands across Pinellas County, coming, and the old bombing range, you remember that, on 580 during World War II?
Right.
It bisected that at an angle. It came under the traffic light, which wasn't there at that time, at McMullen Booth and Curlew Road. Then it varied just a little, a slight curve, and it passed right at the front steps of the Unisys plant today. You can still see the marks of the old trail all the way through North Oldsmar, going just south of the racetrack road. And the track of the road running back to the barns from the racetrack road was approximately the same location where it crossed double branches. That was the only place you could get across double branches because the military had cleared it out.
Well, that, where it crossed double branches, it went through our farm.
Yes,
That
sir.
piece of ground on the other side there is still wild.
I remember your farm very well.
And that road, I imagine if it was burned off, you could go in there and still see it.
You can see the effects of it, yes, sir. The ruts are pretty well
Yeah,
eroded.
but when it burns, usually you can see something.
Correct. And I could almost walk there and show you the route.
It used to burn every year.
Well, we stopped that burning.
Yeah.
You know, we picked that up from the old Indian tribes here. They would burn small patches for the gardens next year. We used to have hundreds of acres of wild oats from here north. And that was wonderful deer and cattle feed. They'd make a living off those wild oats.
Yeah, when they burn off of that old grass, though, that wasn't no good, the new grass would come up.
The wiregrass was even edible to the livestock at that time.
Okay, whenever Oldsmar was developed to a point that people were starting to come in, like Mr. Keller and Gam's father, they both worked for Mr. Olds, right?
At first,
At first.
and they took over the plant.
Do you, excuse me, sir, do you have any proof of the ownership of the sawmill here? I'm anxious about that because I paid the obligations wherein Dr. St. George Fechtig had invested in this sawmill right here. And I'm interested financially in settling all those debts so I get clear title to every piece of property north of the racetrack and north of the Tampa Road, except for the section where the colored people were developing, and the Heidelberg Tavern, which I have the old Rex Cafe here. Some of you haven't seen it, just pass around if you care to. And that was the place that they all met from the racetrack. The jockeys and bettors and
A mile south of,
they served the drinks and food and some rooms.
Where the sawmill was,